Hello, everyone. Good morning, midday, afternoon, whatever, or evening or night, wherever you are. Welcome to another virtual DD. Glad you're all here at this, new session with Andrea talking about sharing your system knowledge with Bytesize Architecture Sessions. I'm really looking forward to it. She already introduced me months ago, and I've used it myself. And I really enjoyed it, and the team I worked with really enjoyed it as well. So thank you for being here, Andrea. As ever, this is live streamed to YouTube, recorded. So people on Zoom, please leave your camera off if you don't want to be seen. And please ask questions any way you like. You can do that in the Zoom chat. You can do that in the YouTube chat. And we'll pick it up. And over to you, Andrea.
Well, thank you. And Forte, welcome to people everywhere. And yeah, let's talk about this sharing of knowledge stuff. So, it's funny because there's some pictures of tapas there, and tapas are so delicious and easy to share, and you can go like, oh, I'll just have a little bit of this, but today I'm not feeling like olives. And wouldn't it be nice if sharing knowledge would be so easy and containerized as that? So let's see if maybe we can approach something like this in a somewhat efficient way. So my name is Andrea, and if you want to know more about me, you can check me out of the internet. And I'm a consultant that specializes in functional programming and then software architecture as well, because why not? I think the key thing about working for 20 plus years in the industry is that you get to experience a lot of failure and success, hopefully, otherwise that would be quite sad. But the failure or generally it doesn't come in binaries, right? It's not like you completely failed or not. It comes in degrees. And a pattern that I notice is that when teams don't do well, sometimes the project can succeed, but you feel like it could have been better. That generally, more a contributing factor is the lack of a coherent view by the team of what is it that they were trying to do. And so this kind of comes out of that. I came up with these Bytesize Sessions over the last few years, and the reason I started talking about it is because I think it actually helps. So what are we going to do today? How are we going to do this? Because it's kind of weird to talk about it. I'm going to just say what it is, do a brief overview. Then I'm going to drive you. Imagine that we're going through this first session, right? So hopefully you feel it first person. Then I'm going to break out in depth each of the constituent parts of the sessions. Then we're going to do some final remarks, and then we're going to have some questions. So let's do this. So just to demystify this, the Bytesize Architecture Sessions of D is a workshop format. So what do we mean by a workshop format? Well, it's a highly collaborative session / meeting, hence the workshopy bit, with a format, right? It has some predefined format that you can follow. Maybe you can learn it and then adapt it so that it works for you in some different way. It's recurrent. So the idea is that the sessions are short and that you repeat them rather than try to do a massive session. And this thing of T, if you're a programmer, this makes sense. If not, just don't worry about it. Basically, what we're trying to say is that you can use a particular tool. I'm going to recommend using C4 for a lot of the initial periods, but you can use anything else that you like, that you think it will work, given how the session works. It's funny because I nearly didn't start talking about the sessions at all, but I was reminded about Pomodoro and how useful and simple this is, but also how powerful it is. So Pomodoro, as you know, you put a timer, 15 minutes, you do work, you focus on that work. When the desire and drive to go and check on the Twitter or whatever drives you, you can say, no, I'll wait until the thing, and then I'll do it, and you can focus. And that's changed the life and efficiency of many people. I'm hoping that by talking about it and maybe teaching it, I can help people be more efficient with teams and maybe actually have fun. That's actually why I wanted to talk about it, because when I do this with people, I notice the teams have fun, and that's weird in a meeting. So let's see if I can change the page. Okay, so the parts of the meeting, right? So the parts of the meeting, like in most meetings of any kind, you kind of want to do a little bit of prep. Who's going to be there, for example? What tools are you going to use? And then you want to go through the session. The session has 4 parts. There's a short planning. The key of the Bytesize architecture sessions is the alone together bit and the consensus. And finally, a summary, right? So let's see. Why would you do this, right? Because you could be like, yeah, you're trying to make me do some weird meeting in some weird format. Why are you punishing me this way? Another meeting, cry. But the thing is, not only these are fun, and at least they were in my experience, and I've run them for quite a while, but they help you get a more congruent system view. And the reason this happens is because you have element of introspection and also elements of trying to build consensus together. And so the resulting knowledge is implicitly shared. So it kind of removes a lot of the, oh, we always ask this one person about our questions on systems. Because of this alone together, I find that this is quite an enabling format. I've been told by people that are neurodivergent that they found this a lot easier to actually actively participate than other types of formats. Again, it's your mileage might vary, but you know, all I have is their feedback, which is positive. So I got that. And because as you're doing these meetings, you start creating documentation. If you're doing C4, then you have the diagrams, etc. The team you start getting used to having these design tools that they just start like using it spontaneously, which is super nice. So this is the brief overview. Let's go and do the first Bytesize architecture session. I have a thing for llamas, so if you don't like them, I'm sorry, there's lots. So we're all ready to do this, the prep. Cool. Okay, so this is the team, right? We're here to do one of the sessions, and this is the team you work with. You know, have turtle, bunny, pink squirrel, giraffe. Very, very nice. And you're wondering, who do I invite to the meeting? When I think about this team, I'm thinking people that you do stuff with, right? Like these are people that are doing programming, design, product. This is the people, this team maybe is the people that you have stand up with, right? This is the people you want to invite to that meeting. Not because, mostly because if people care enough to be there every day, there must be a reason for them to be there. So you invite those people, but as you're inviting them, you also tell them what is it that you're going to be doing, right? Just like, hey, we're doing Bytesize session, very nice. Do you know about C4 context diagrams? And they'll probably know, yes. If they say no, you maybe show them. You say, hey, a C4 context diagram looks something like this, right? It's a really high level diagram where you kind of remove a lot of the details of the system. And what you want to know is the high level bits. Like in this case, there's like a person here. There's this gray things, our external system, and this is our thing, right? And people go like, okay, maybe they'll spend some 10 minutes getting tooling or understanding better. What I found is people pick it up quite quickly, especially when you're doing the high level part. Important to do it outside the meeting. So
Andrea,
this, yes.
One question. Do you do this virtually or on premise?
You can do it both ways. I actually address the differences as in the kind of more in-depth part, but it's easy to do it both ways. And the only thing is on the online thing, you want to do it slightly shorter so that people are more focused. Anyway, so you show them the context diagram, people learn, and you actually get to the day of the meeting, right? So you already told people you're using this tool. This planning bit, which is on the day of the meeting, you spend 5 minutes deciding what is it that concretely you're going to draw. So if you have a small system, maybe you can draw the whole context diagram and that's cool. But it could be that actually the system is slightly bigger or the boundaries aren't clear of the things that you own and you don't own. Just decide on something, spend no more than 5 minutes trying to come up with what that is and tell people, right, we agree. If you're running this for the first time, so some things might not be so simple, but let's see what happens, right? Important thing here, make it about a system that exists. I have no idea why, but people love the idea of on the first time doing something that doesn't exist, which is a lot harder to draw, especially if you're drawing all differently and separately. So that's interesting. So then you go to the essential part of the Bytesize sessions. This is called Alone Together. So this is 5 minutes. You literally put on a timer for 5 minutes, and every one of you will be in the same room, physically or online. If you're online, it's in a mirror board with like the different regions and all that. And you'll be drawing the thing that you just agreed to draw, right? So you're going to be drawing the thing, and you're going to be thinking, oh, this full connect to bus. Actually, you know what? I think that doesn't work anymore. And so you can make me do some question marks and stuff like that. And after the timer elapses, what everyone in here will do is not only show I did this thing, but you're going to basically tell the story on how the system works. You don't go like foo goes to bus and then why. You want to say, this thing comes from here, and then I think we sent this bundle thing, and then it's processed, and it takes a long time. And basically, what you want to hear is people explaining the story of how the system works, while everyone else actively listens, which is really good. One of the most valuable things I find of this is that people really kind of learn how much they know and they don't know about the system that they're drawing. It's very introspective, and the active listening second part of this is also super powerful. Also, it's quite short. So, and when they're doing showing the system here, it's easier to actively listen because they're talking about something that everyone in that room knows. So it's not like a surprise. There might be some surprising bits, but there's no like massively unknown thing. So that's the second part, Alone Together. So after this thing that takes 5 minutes on the timer and then another few minutes talking through the thing, you move to consensus. So this is the part of the meeting where, given what you have, so now you know exactly where everyone's coming from. Very nice. You together try to create the one ring to, oh no, that's another film. The one diagram to rule them all. And what you're trying to do here is, there's always strange questions that you're like, oh, does this or that. If there's questions you can't answer, like anyone in the meeting room can't answer, it's all right to have a note, like actually take a note somewhere, and designate a person that will kind of deal with that offline, basically after the meeting's done. So this part of the meeting should take between 30 and 45 minutes. And then you might or might not be done. Try to leave it somewhere that is at least some conversation has finished. Generally, on the first time, it happens if you have done some sort of preppy work, which we'll talk about later. So after that, you have the last 5 minutes of the talk. In these last 5 minutes, what you want is that everyone says what they learned. Oh, I just learned about the foo actually bus, and I didn't know about this thing, or I found that really weird, or whatever. Basically, let people answer the question of, what did you learn? And it could be like, oh, that it was fun, whatever it is, right? The second thing you want to learn is designate someone that will convert this kind of draft they created, right? So because if you were online, you had like some mirror thing with some arrows, and it needs to be converted to actually a C4 diagram. And if you're in person, you're in a whiteboard, and so you definitely need to move that into somewhere. It's good to have someone designated to do that, and that person rotates, because that's where some people can get some nice skills on learning how to model things, because it's never completely straightforward to do that. So that is, there's one more thing that oh yeah, this should take approximately 5 minutes. Again, people sometimes can be summarizing for quite a long time, so try to keep it tight and neat. So with that, ta-da, you just finished your first Bytesize session. Excellent. Team, you've done so well, right? It wasn't that complicated, hopefully. Now, to organize the next one, because the power of Bytesize come from iteration. I'm going to now go in depth into each of these little parts, but is anyone kind of following? Does it, is everything all right, basically? And anyone on fire?
It's everything fine.
Cool, excellent.
I have another question for you from Sasha. If you take all the levels for C4, or just talking about the first one?
No, just on the first minute, think of something you need to draw in 5 minutes, right? So this is why I suggested a C4 context diagram, right? Just the very, very highest of level, right? Or like a system diagram, depends on what kind of system are you doing. Just try one. And when you're trying to decide what is it you want to design, to use something, imagine something that this system, you will draw in 2 minutes. If you know really well. But if you don't know it, it will take you a little bit longer and you have questions. Right. So let's now break up into the constituent parts of this. Right. So the prep, right? The prep. Interesting things about the prep. As any meeting or workshop type format, who turns up is super important, right? So for the first few sessions, try to keep those people to the same people. After all, doing an exercise like this is a massive thing that helps you create a shared language of some sort, right? You could call it nearly an endo language, but I'm not going to go there because then it will be very long. So, especially if the team is not used to modeling in any way, it's really good if the core of the people is always the same. So keep it to the people in the stand-up. I find it very strange, but I get this question every time. And the question is something like, are you sure we should invite insert role to this thing? And the way I generally answer this is saying, do you want that person to understand how the system actually works? Can they make useful and good decisions if they don't know that? And they go like, oh, and the answer is generally that people should be there. So, ask yourself that question. Do you want, product to know how things work? Do you want design to know how things work, and so forth? Do you want programmers to understand how things work? And generally the answers to all of those is yes, but hey, who knows? You know your team better than I do. So first part is who is coming. The second part is prepare the people so that they are not shocked in a negative way. So if you're going to use a new tool, let's say you've been doing C4, so you want to try, I don't know, some new thing you found, this thing, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Whatever you want to try, I'm sure people would, the more they do this, the more they would be keen to try some new things. Just, talk to them about it all together, show them why they should try this, teach them or learn together, whatever it is, just prep them, right? It's actually a really nice format to try new things. Just take into account that the key thing that Bytesize give you is this alone together thing, and whether the thing that you're proposing, the tool you're proposing, actually lends itself to use that. So yeah, key things for this: who's coming to the meeting, what tool you're using, and then you're in business. So during the day, the first part of this, you'll notice that I put some kind of suggested times there in case I forgot to say it. So this suggested time is generally for online. I find that in person, especially if you are going to the office just to do this and you haven't seen your faces in the last 3 weeks or 3 months, the times tend to stretch a lot longer. So that's the timings. Anyway, come back to the plan. First part of the meeting. I would say that even though in person or not, you want to keep this pretty nippy, right? Because people are already, it's like it's a meeting. So you want to show them that you get to the meat of the meeting. Oh, very funny. So try to, if you're the host, if you're the person kind of organizing this, make sure you come to with some idea of what could it be, just in case you say, hey, what do you want to draw today? And, I don't know, people are not awake, they didn't have the coffee, or they're just thinking about the thing that was just happening 3 minutes ago. Whatever it is, have a suggestion. So, because it's easy to say no to a suggestion and then say, no, actually, we need this X better, but at least there's something. If you're the host of this, or anyone kind of self-designate as a host, you're an enabler, and that means that you want to make sure that everyone has a voice. You want to make sure that those quieter people, you say, hey, what do you think, Bonnie? You've been very quiet. It's like, oh, I have a bad voice today, or something. And then you're like, okay, cool, maybe you can type this time. But, enable people so that they can participate. I find that when you include people even like that, unsurprisingly, they're keener to take part in it. Who knew? Actually, two things about this initial part of the meeting. The first thing is, it can be tempting to try to record this. Don't. And the reason for that is it's hard to draw something and be wrong, and then to discuss how wrong you were, etc. So, and that will happen when you're doing this drawing thing that maybe you don't, about a system you either don't know anything about, or just you don't remember right now, or whatever. I find that meeting flows much better when you don't have a record of it. Obviously, this could be completely dependent on psychological safety of the place. But as a general rule, I think it's, you could do a session just going through what you learn that is shorter and more efficient as a recording. The other thing that I do is, when you're running this online, I ask people to commit what is something really, really hard to them. And that is to not just turn off notifications, but actually close Slack. You have no idea how obviously hard this is for some people. But I'm like, I commit to turning it off. You cannot turn it off, obviously, you're a grown person. But we will all get a lot more out of it if you do. And this just lasts, this much time. I got some success out of that. It's worth asking, and people kind of realized why I'm doing that. Again, things that worked online rather than because I said so or whatever. Anyway, on the plan, keep it short. Host is an enabler. Turn off Slack, right? So the key of this thing. So as I said, you basically have 5 minutes with a timer, and everyone is drawing their own drawing, including the host. Everyone is doing it. And afterwards, they're going to have to show this, right? So this has so many benefits. The whole thing about this introspection and realizing how much you actually don't know your system, or how much you do know the system, is extremely powerful. The converse is also true, as in people that are newer to the system or less confident or experienced, this exercise helps them massively build confidence. And that's because, they're drawing a drawing, and then they show the drawing. They're like, oh, mine is probably terrible. And then they show the drawing, and maybe it's not as complete as, but it's generally quite on the path. And, they are basically gaining XP, many experience points, but also that confidence is building in a safe environment. When it comes to new people on the team, or coming from anywhere, experienced or not, one of the biggest things that Alone Together does is they start asking questions that we have forgotten to answer. And isn't that great? It's like, those questions that are annoying. Why we didn't do X? This obvious improvement in the system. It's like, oh yeah, we thought about it, but blah. So it's good that they're kind of showing this, bringing back to the 4 important questions. So this is all things that happen during Alone Together. When it comes to showing and telling what you have done, one of the key benefits of talking through the thing is that there's very concrete questions coming to the fore. The other thing that happens is that everyone starts understanding a lot better where everyone else is coming from. And there's a higher level of empathy that is kind of, the empathy raises, because you kind of go like, oh, of course. It's not that they're like, it's just that they thought that this thing talks to that. Obviously, now we can talk better. Also, I noticed that this helps find some conflict in domain vocabulary. There are always overloaded words in any company. Like the current one for me is availability, which means like 57 different things. So we banned it. And we were like, when you say availability, now you have to explain this really long thing. But the banning, it doesn't work. People say it anyway. So Alone Together, super powerful. And because of this kind of slightly higher empathy thing, this consensus thing, one of the longest bits of the meeting is that, people have more time for the other people, right? This, oh, yes, of course. It's less contentious. This is the fun part of it. People are like, but how does it work? It's us, the team, against the system, trying to understand it rather than, oh, Giraffe came with the story. She did this diagram the other day. I don't know if I like it. No, the attitude is more about like, oh, we're trying to figure it out, how to make this drawing better. And that's excellent. It's kind of the difference between an adversarial game and a cooperative game. So on this thing, you wanted to, if you're online, you want to keep it to 30 minutes. If you're offline, if you're going over 45 minutes, make a break. If questions arise, delegate someone. If someone is the host, actually the host should delegate someone else, saying, okay, someone wants to volunteer to keep track of questions that we as a group can't answer right now. Sometimes there's questions about like, how does this thing actually work? And we can check the code. If it's not going to take forever, you can do that. But try not to distract yourself too much to keep it tidy. Basically, aim for the outcome of the plan, and that's why you plan during the whole meeting, right? Yeah, that's why you plan right at the start of the meeting, because you're saying we're trying to draw blah, right? So aim for that. We're not sure, oh, what are we doing? Well, we tried to do this. Oh, okay. And it could be that you don't finish it, and that's fine. And then you need to continue it some more time. Finally, you have the summary. Really good to try to iterate on what you just learned, and to have this designated person to kind of convert from draft. This is really useful from learning architecture in a safe environment. I haven't experienced a lot of safe architecture things that work for a group. Generally, someone is the chosen one, or some self-selected individuals go off and do something. Again, my experience, hopefully other people didn't do it that way. But I'm hoping that this kind of calls out and enables, hey, learning to draw diagrams is actually not trivial, and you cannot just learn it. And this is where being deliberate about it, I think, creates better practices. And also it creates a practice that at least all of these people share because they all reviewed it, etc. So then you need to do it again, right? So you did the meeting and you do the thing, keeping up with it, make it fun. I find that because it's fun, people tend to want to do it more. And also, I noticed that people start asking, okay, well, this is where we are now. Where are we going? What is our strategy? And I'm like, oh, you want a strategy? What is a strategy? And then that leads into other fairly cool questions, which we're not going to discuss just right now unless you really want to. And so I give you these llamas of peace and relaxedness for just 1 second so I can catch my breath and have some water. Very nice. And okay, so I think you understand maybe slightly better these three whys, hopefully, and the the homogeneous system view, and why that would be the enabling format and why that happens, and this creates design tools. Kind of this thing is all about, well, you create all these diagrams and people kind of come back to them. And so that makes me think.
Nei, nå skal du gjøre deg klar til å.
Oops. Okay, someone's talking to someone else. That's cool. So that makes me think about what are the foundational pieces for your cats. Also, I kind of want an excuse to add cats because my cats was getting really jealous that there was all these llamas. So you might think, oh, okay, I can grab this really cool workshop format and just run it, right? And I want to say, like, for like any process, you want to know that your people are going to like it, right? And that they will want to do it. So I think that for this, you want to have some psychological safety, or just even like if you don't know how to do that or what that means, you can start with going like, just propose it to them. After all, we're all doing architecture in one way or another. Like every programmer, every dev person, every product person at some point makes some level of decision making that is actually pretty hard to change. And sometimes this whole thing is quite non-deliberate. It just kind of happens by the non-architecture architecture. So if you're gonna if you realize that what you're thinking and what everyone else is thinking is kind of slightly different, then you can wear the hat and say, hey, how about we try to be more proactive and run this session and we all learn together and see what happens. Again, this completely comes from my experience, and I don't know if it will work for everyone. What I'm trying to say with these cat pictures is check with your team and see if you can play together. You could try it. The worst thing that can happen is that you learn something. And with that, thank you very much. And with all the llamas, and I wonder if you have any questions. And that's it.
Yes. Thank you very much, Andrea.
You're welcome. Got a market.
And a nice. So I don't see any questions yet in the YouTube chat, but also most of the Zoom chats are already answered. But maybe someone on Zoom has some questions that they want to ask live. So please, you can unmute your microphone and ask them, or just ask them in the chat, and we'll ask them for you, of course. But let's start. See if it gives people some time to.
I have a question. I want to know how many iterations do you need to say that the team is good enough for this format?
Oh, well, if you run it once and they liked it, then you're ready. There is no precondition to run it. What I was trying to say with those slides is that you shouldn't force it on them. You shouldn't be like, we're doing this. And it's like, no, we don't want to do this. And then you'll be like, no, do it because I told you, right? It's kind of, they're going to have to do some work. And so it's good to, bring them along nicely, make it something that they want to do. It's like, hey, do you want to try some new format of knowledge sharing? And it's like this and like that and the other. And they're like, oh, yeah, that could be fun. That's the kind of interactions you want to be having. There is no like strict, are they ready or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense because I asked because I think I have a team in mind, and for now I'm the only one who draws C4 diagrams, and I think it could be the first session to show them what C4 is and also the different levels.
Yeah,
so
I think
it sounds good.
I think if I was to do that, if I was you, or what I understand of your situation is, I would spend 10 or 15 minutes talking through them on C4 and that they know it, and then do it so they're not like surprised by the tool and they're like, oh, I know, I mean, Sasha, or you're the only one that likes this, but I prefer UML, so, or something else. And so, you're agree and then proceed. But if sometimes I notice that the reticence to draw comes from not knowing that you're doing it right, or fear of what happens if you do it wrong. And this is where it's kind of important to tell the team about how this format is quite safe and why it's safe, right? It's fine. And
I think in the second stage where we're all alone together draws this diagram, then you should accept different formats.
Totally, absolutely. There will be some boxes with like comic thoughts, like call out diagram saying this thing. I know it's there, but I have no idea what it does it talk to, and that's it, but everything goes right, and that's okay.
Yeah, sorry. I think that's important because, well, actually, the day before yesterday, I was doing some sequence diagrams, UML, and I'm like, oh, darn, I need to capture something and I don't know if it's possible. Okay, I'll just use a sticky, right? It's like, don't even the first Bytesize session, I even didn't introduce any framework or model technique or tool for that. And I just let them go free format. There was one rule: make a legend. Right?
Fair enough.
Because I don't want people to get stuck in, is this the correct? Same with event storming, right? Event storming is very simple, but I say domain event should be past tense, and then I say forget about that, just write it down and
see what happens.
Yeah.
I tend to recommend the C4 context. I saw your question, Christina. I'll go to that in a second. I recommend that because I noticed that when people draw, you tell them draw at this system, they try to do all the detail, and obviously you can't do it in 5 minutes. So just do the highest level, and it's like, so that's not specific enough. Where C4 actually addresses that and makes people think about, oh, actually there's many layers and we can do another diagram other time. Anyway, Christina?
I was thinking the whole time about one, you have to have psychological safety for this. At least I think a lot, because in each team there are people a bit more experienced, less experienced, introverts, very different persons, and so my actual question is, should the most knowledgeable person be the host and do not draw any diagram? Because it's not unfair advantage, or the team architect, or I don't know.
So I think your question is, should the person that knows most host and not draw diagrams? Is that your question?
Yeah.
It's funny because I thought that too at the first few times, I like the first few years, but I thought, okay, when you do that, then people know, and then they kind of feel like they're under test. So when I kind of want like just everyone draws, it's equal. Okay, that person that knows most. I mean, if you've been somewhere for 10 years and also you're the lead, it's possible you know the system better than everyone else. But guess what? If you've been there for 10 years, maybe you haven't worked on this piece that, some other people have worked on recently and they changed it and you don't know what that looks like anymore. So I actually just leave it, everyone's the same. And
it can also be a good example, as in you draw it yourself and then someone challenges you on your model and you say, whoa, I never knew that was there. And then you show sort of like, oh, the person with the highest rank that knows the most is actually wrong. Oh, yes. Okay. And that creates even more psychological, create more psychological safety.
Exactly.
And but that you need psychological safety again.
This is what I meant. No, this is not. This is the not Kenny's solution. This is a sarcastic one. Andrea's example, yes, this is the good way. But I mean, so why should someone who knows, obviously, oh, I don't know so much. Why should I do this? Why should make myself vulnerable? This is what I mean with, it is really, you make yourself vulnerable and explain your team that you maybe don't have any clue.
Well, why should you do this? Well,
yeah.
I think the main reason, I think anyone, okay, maybe this idealistically, we all know that we're not infallible and that we need to learn. Again, I haven't yet met anyone that refused, just kind of plainly refused because they knew better, thankfully. Maybe I've been lucky with the teams I work with, but I think once most of the team commits, there's a lot of kind of peer pressure to trying it out. You can decide that you don't like it afterwards, but also because it has such a gamified type feeling, at least for me, I don't know how to explain it better. It just kind of works. Then you kind of, even if you didn't want to like it, you still like it. And I've seen this in people that they turned up kind of going like, oh, I don't know if I believe in this meeting stuff. And then they were like really actively participating during the stuff and asking questions and stuff. So again, maybe I'm really lucky with the teams I work with, but I haven't found plain refusal when the rest, because then most people will think, oh, they'll think that I don't know because I'm not turning up. So I guess, but again, I haven't happened. So
okay, thank you.
No, thank you. That's a good question. Ooh, it's very warm.
Is it? Any other questions?
One question. What happens if there's a pre-decided topic, people come in, but there is no consensus? I mean, sometimes people have such different views about the same thing. You can't really reach to a consensus, or it could be that till the end of 1 hour, people still have very different views, and maybe it is a bit closer to what the system actually is doing for that component, or maybe it's really far away. You didn't really hit the spot with the right process in there. So does it mean that we go back and verify in detail?
Okay, so I think the question you're asking is like, what if we go through the consensus stage, but actually we don't reach a consensus and the views are kind of polarized, and we don't know what's actually happened? Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay,
yeah.
So this is kind of why I don't know, while I was doing the talk, I said throw, especially initially, an existing system. And if after an hour of talking, you know every one of you did the thing, and then you're trying to get a consensus how that actually works, and you don't know, that's fine. Write down the question. One person, can be responsible for writing down the question, or if everyone wants to know like what's going on, and you can check it in code, open the computer and check. If it's going to take longer, designate one person that is responsible. That doesn't mean nobody else can check this, but one person responsible for answering this to the group. So because this is existing systems, there aren't, oh, the system is this, but also is this. In fact, that would be its own answer, right? So that responsible person then comes back to the group after a day or two, whatever, saying, actually, I checked it out. I went and talked to the third party, blah. Generally, that's where there's a lot of time lost. Or I investigated the network configuration for this, or whatever it is. Basically, some slow process comes back to the team with the knowledge acquired. And then there's a discussion about that particular thing. And you can make it its own session on like, okay, given the new information we have, how do we do this? Because you don't know what the answer would be. Does that make sense?
Yes. So basically, we take a break, go back, research, and come back, and then try to form the consensus in the next meeting.
Exactly. Take a break. Like if the end of the session is on on, we don't know how this should be. Make sure that the question, or if there's a series of questions, that the questions are well formed. It's not like, oh, okay, you know, John or Sarah or whatever, answer the question, and they'll be like, what question? Form the question together. It's like, how does the interaction between the third party X and the system foo and bas work in this particular system? That's a good question. Not like, how does it work? That's a too generic question that doesn't help a lot, right? So that person that is going to go and do the research has a very good context of what the info they're looking is. And we all agreed, and most importantly, on what the question is, right?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very nice question.
Yeah, very nice. And that does happen, by the way.
Yeah, I guess so. Any other questions? I also guess this happens a lot when you have for instance, the dungeon master, right? Thinking they know everything, and then the team says, "Well, actually," then you have, I think, a deeper social problem as well.
Yes, there is a bit of that. This is why it's really nice to have the alone together time at the start, like closer to the start of the thing. So there wasn't this time there where people could look what they did and kind of like, I'll just agree with this dungeon master for a bit because fighting it is just too draining. You can't fight with the thing that is already there, or it's a lot harder. It's like, well, that's what I think is there. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm saying, and if there's a lot of consensus around that, but then obviously that's when it gets a lot more difficult, when there is foundational problems in the team, right? And that's nothing that a workshop will address or not. You can ameliorate, but you need to actually deal with the problem.
So I see a question from Lene in the YouTube. And can you give us some tips on how to pick the topics, especially for the first iterations?
Yeah, sure. I'd say the system you're working on at the highest level is where you want to start. If the system that you're working on is too large, then split it up. You're a team. You're not working on all the system. You're working on some subpart, because ideally you're 6 to 8 people. You're not 200. And if you are, you need to break it down so that the meeting can be 6 to 8 people. And choose a subsection of the thing. Do you have people interacting with the thing, with the system? What are those people? What are the third parties? What is your system? That's it. You know, again, this is why the C4 context is a great tool choice, because it helps you get like, okay, we want the highest level and a subset of actually what you work on every day. Does your team focus on, I don't know, the purchase order system or invoicing? Cool, draw that.
So if there's no further questions, I have 2 more, but any other people want to pitch in?
Sure, I've got a question. It's kind of similar to what ABSA 899 was talking about. So it sounds like the application for this is really discovering knowable entities in your system. And I'm asking this because I work in a space where I'm doing a crossover between behavior and organizations as well as our material systems. Consensus isn't really something that we can go for because contexts, you know, we need to understand that there's multiple angles of understanding context, and that's okay. It can stay unresolved. I'm wondering if there is room to use this in that space where unresolved is okay, or if you're proposing that this is resolving what was unresolvable in that, you know, context heavy space.
I'm curious how, so you're saying it's possible that in your context you won't reach consensus, but why? I'm not saying that this thing should definitely give you consensus or not. I'm just saying, I'm just curious about what is that kind of context, like what is the kind of makeup of your team that you don't need to have an agreement on what the thing you're doing is?
Well, I guess it depends on the project I'm working on, but when I'm working on a project now around like inclusion in the workplace and the definition of what inclusion means to people and how it relates to our hiring process and recruiting and promotions and all of that sort of stuff. And so there is a bit of systemic process involved in that. There's a lot of legal that's involved in that, but there is also, it's heavily contextualized just by observations and history and expectations that the expectation of consensus is totally off the table going into this project.
Okay, I am extremely curious about this, Kyle. Can we take it offline so that I can learn more and maybe find out a little bit, can have a longer conversation? Maybe we can find, basically I can share whatever my experience is about this and see if we can help you in any way.
Certainly. Yep, I'd like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome.
So I think so also about the consensus part, before I ask my question, but well, having done this as well, I still feel there's not really consensus in the model because it's also separate teams that use the architecture, and it's fine, right? I say, well, we discovered a lot. For now, it's fine, and every time we have another discussion, we then maybe decide to update it or not. But I always remind myself of what Ruth always says, right? Diagrams are there to explain to others and not actually being a consistent view of what it is. It's there to, hey, today I had a discussion again. Oh yeah, what's this thing called again? Well, I had this discussion with this person before, and here is the discussion in a diagram. Do you think it's the same way, or should we update it? So it was a very nice visual way of the discussion. And I always remind myself of what Ruth says, right? Diagrams are there to explain to others. So for me, consensus is not even the main purpose, just sharing and agreeing. I'm not sure if you see it different, Andrea, but
I think the way I reason about this is not so much on building the consensus, but in building the endo language. And because I think the main win of this is that now people start getting used to this thing of talking about the system together. And to talk about the system together, they need to use the same words. And as they use the same words, they, when someone new comes in, they need to learn what is this language they're speaking of. It's like, oh, it's, the bazoo. Oh, what is a bazoo? And so forth. So I think as the language builds itself, the more that happens, that's how consensus is. It's not like the one. It's more like some kind of fluffy goal that is over there. Again, that's my interpretation and experience of it. I think, and also why this practice or workshopy thing, I like to try to cement it at the beginning on existing systems, because or something that is like you can check. Basically, if you don't have an existing system, do you have something you can check? Laws? Do you have, a chair? Something that exists that you can, as a group, go and verify and put words to it. And you use the same words to describe that hard reality, right? So that's how I think about it. I think it is, it would be really nice if we just kind of poop, and you we reach the consensus, but you could in a session aim to have the goal of, can we have a word where this is it? And it could be that the answer to that question is like, no, we can't have a word, but we can have 50 words that approach it. And maybe next session we'll find the word.
Yeah. This is actually a training to have in long term a consensus, to understand each other.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Very, very tricky. Very good. Now I got you.
Anyone else with questions? Then I'll ask my final question.
Ooh, the boss question.
Not my final. I already saw someone mentioning like, what's your favorite tool? And you're mentioning, well, I like UML better than C4. Actually, I have two questions now that I think about it. But why do you like UML better? So I'm also a fan of UML.
No,
oh,
no,
I thought you said.
I don't mind actually. I think I like okay, so let's go back this way. I'm someone that really likes programming languages, for example. Let's say that. I also think all programming languages are terrible. Why? Because none of them do everything I want, or they do too much. Right? I think tools can be similar that way, in that you wish they could be everything, but in reality, you just need to have the more tools you know, and hopefully want to use them. And also, it could be that I love tool X. Let's say it's C4 or UML or sequence diagram. Doesn't really matter what it is. I could really like it, but if the team I'm working it with absolutely hates it or just reacts in some weird way to it, I need to be able to change, because after all, the tool is just as an accident. So if they love, I don't know, monkeys tool, then I will learn that and use it, right? Because after all, that's the thing that frustrates me. The thing that drives all of this stuff for me is that I want people to be able to have a shared knowledge, and that they have fun doing it if we can.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really mind. I think C4 is powerful. I think UML is powerful. I think you could overdo all of them basically, and that's where it becomes annoying. So the way I try to present the tools is like, let's see where this team can get to, how deep they go, and there could be like one person that goes all the way in. They read the specification of whatever it is from 1964 or whatever, and that could grate other people on the team. So you kind of want to manage that, make sure like, hey, you love tools, lovely. Maybe don't annoy everyone else. Or how about we try other tools just so that they have time? Have you considered a new, other hobbies? Do you want to get a pet parrot? Just to keep them a little bit busy, right? I'm being facetious, but I think it's great that people get into things, but not at the cost of everyone else. Especially when it comes to tools that bring people together, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Anyway.
Any other question before I really gonna ask my final question? Now I just have one left. No, okay. So well, I tried this, of course, and well, we didn't use C4 model or any tool, so we opened it up, and then, well, I actually translated it to C4 actually. So from that point, and then got the feedback loop in for them. But what do you do with the outcomes? What is your favorite thing to do after you're finished and you all had a consensus and everyone is party, like bring the llamas in?
Bring the llamas. Well, for
what would you do?
Yeah, that's a great question actually. For a few of the teams, it wound up somewhere like Notion/Confluence, basically somewhere where the documents live. The pet peeve for everyone is, if it's searchable, then it's not editable, then it's not. So there's always some kind of managing of that. At the moment, I found that you can do what's it called, Mermaid, on a Confluence plugin, so it's editable in the diagram and searchable. So, and on a tool that a lot of people use, which is Confluence. Whether I love it or not, we can talk about it one day when we're in person. The answer is maybe. But it can be handy. You can write some text. Like if you do write the learnings, which is really good if you do, but most people really don't want to do it because they're like, I finished the meeting, let's go and do the same. But if you do write the things and then add the diagrams, it can be a really nice way to see how it built. But if you just keep the diagrams and they're accessible by the team, for the team, that's what you're aiming for. Your goal as a person that collects these things, these artifacts, is can the people that did them access them easily and change them, right? Because obviously this happens iteratively. And so what you want is that they can go there and say, actually, this is a live system. So this diagram needs to be updated. In fact, they use it for design sessions. They can go easily grab it and go like, what if we did this line and this other line and actually this other line? Everyone understands that because they made that diagram. So that's basically whatever you choose, the goal is it's accessible to the team and they can't change it. It's not like some weird PNG that they have to do some strange chicken dance to the moon at 3 p.m. or whatever. It needs to be easy to access. So if they love code tools, like, great. Can all the people in that team actually do that and not bias it to just the programmers?
I think that's always a very important one where you see a lot of discussions with, well, architects outside the team. Yeah, but you can model everything in whatever Archie made thing. But then it's not accessible for developers, right? It's not part of their real IDE, which is an integrated development environment, but that goes beyond the IDE, right? If it's not integrated, they won't use it, I guess, right? So what is accessible for the developers, that's what you want to, and even if it's suboptimal, it's better than something that they don't see at all.
Exactly. I think that if, let's say, there is in a role in a organization, there has maybe some architectural role, but it's somewhere up here, and then there is many teams that work with that architectural role. Let's just imagine that's not an uncommon thing. It's good to optimize for the teams that created these things, and then if someone else needs them, someone can grab them from wherever they are and massage them to be consumed by whoever needs them. Probably they don't need it like live, right? So yes, yeah. That's the answer.
I think that's always the balance, right? Consistency versus accessibility in this case.
But this can't be a problem. Everything, it has a history. Everything can be copied, and what you are saying is forbidding by laws or rights instead of flat and do some guidelines like, please do not change this, copy it if you want to change it. So
I think this is where it's highly company specific, right? And you need to find a process that kind of works for you. So I can tell you what works for me, but I'm like, okay, this is because this guy and this other person and X, and then those three people, and I know they have access to Y and to Google Docs, and you wind up in a solution everyone hates, but it works, and you're like, okay, fine. But it is company specific. You know how your org works, so make it work.
You have started with psychological safety, so I think this should be. So I can't imagine a situation you can have such meetings, and then you can't have access to your own results.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
Yeah. Very cool.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for sharing the Bytesize session.
Thanks to you.
And since there's no other questions, this will be the end. We're gonna shut down the live stream, and then we might have a talk afterwards, still in this Zoom chat.
And goodbye to Nick, John.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone. Thanks for everyone watching on YouTube. Thanks for everyone watching this after the fact. A small thing you might have noticed on Twitter and Mastodon, perhaps. I should say Mastodon and Twitter. Lock the 2nd of January, 7 CET, 4 hours in your agenda. We're gonna organize an open space on architectural decision making, and we're setting that up, and it will be published in the next 2 weeks. So lock that in, and hope to see you then. And thank you again, Andrea. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Slán.